Welcome to Not Parenting. This is Carrie. Let's get untangling.
Okay, so Carrie, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics today, and that is seeing our life as parents, applying all these things that you're teaching us as one big experiment, approaching it all like a curious researcher. Why is that approach important? Like, why does it actually matter?
Well, I think because that's really, if we step back, that's what it all is. You know, you are here living your life and there's no instruction manual. There's no map that's already pre-planned out. You're on the adventure of life, and there's a lot of twists and turns, and there's a lot of unknowns that come up. And then you have these people that are growing and developing and figuring life out. To me, there's no really other way to approach it. I mean, I know there are other ways, but if you are really going to hold this experience of humanhood and parenting and family life, you know, as something that you're embarking on and you're investing in, to me, doing it with the spirit of experimenting, with really seeing everything as we're running experiments so that we can get a better understanding of what are the experiences we're having and how do we want to be experiencing it all as we go.
Yeah, I think about it, or I guess the way that manifests in our life is that we bump up against something gets edgy or sticky. And let's say it's everyone just is sort of disappearing on their devices and we're not really coming back together with any intention. So that's an experiment that we've been running recently, or something we've been working with recently. And so we just create different experiments. So the one that we're running right now is that at 5:30, everyone turns in their devices, 5:30 p.m., including the parents. And until 7:45, we're just together, and someone's cooking and someone's cleaning and someone's playing with a dog, and maybe there's a board game. And there's just in the running of that experiment over the last probably 6 weeks, it's worked some days, it hasn't worked other days, but it's been this sort of mode of travel for that has been, okay, well, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Not like, forget it. Everyone just go to their rooms and be on their phone. Like, it's like, oh, more data. That was interesting.
More data.
Now what?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think so there's the more data, the really getting to know yourself and your people differently, you know, and then the bigger piece of it all is that we're creatures of habit. You know, we as adults, especially, we run the same loops. We run the same tapes. We do things the same way, because we've been doing them that way. We don't often stop and say, is this the most efficient way? Is this the most loving way? Is this the most connected way? Whatever you're going for. That's again why the values are so important. What are you going for? What are the feelings that you want to be aware of and be able to, you know, say, oh, wow, this felt really joyful, or, oh, wow, that felt really adventurous of us, you know. So when you know a little bit more about where you're heading and the things that you want to be illuminating along the path, then the experimenting becomes even richer, because as you're going, you're using your guideposts of whatever that is for you, because it really is something that comes from within and within your partnership and within your whole family. But the more you do that and the more you experiment and say, okay, did that bring more ease, less ease, more joy, less joy, more of what we're going for, less of what we're going for? And so I love it because it shakes out the sheet. That's something I say a lot. It's like there's a lot of ways that we just go about day after day after day. And to me, when you bring in the spirit of experimenting, it's so freeing. There's a freedom. And you have to realize that your people, your growing people, are experimenting constantly because they're figuring it all out. And so to not just be living that and modeling that for them and with them, but to also be making the mistakes and to be looking at the data and to hold it with that lightness that is more along the lines of experimenting than, say, thinking you have to do it right. There's a lot of freedom and it loosens things, I think, both within and within the relationship.
You know, as you said that, I had this realization, or I had this thought, like, you know what? And they're actually better at it than we are. Like they do look for the divergence. Like, Mommy, why don't we just have grapes for dinner? It's like I would not think of that at 46,
Right.
but maybe a 9-year-old would think that. Or why don't we go this way? You know, when you're going on a hike and you're like, no, we usually go this way. It's like, you know what? You're right. Like we could really like capitalize on their innate sense of wonder and awe and serendipity that maybe we've lost. Like we could really employ them as like our chief sort of curiosity officers in that relationship.
I love that. That's brilliant. And it's so true because they're closer to a sense of wonder and a sense of possibility that maybe we aren't as connected to because we're decades into this. And so, I love the idea that leaning into their mode, which is to experiment, explore, and cultivate some skill around, and then onward. I mean, that's the other thing about experimenting, especially with little ones, but any age. Once they really master, you all operate from a Montessori perspective. And what I learned when I was working at a Montessori school years and years ago is when there's an impulse toward learning something, when there's some curiosity, and then the guide really gives some instruction around that and breaks down the steps and invites exploration, there's a deep dive into exploring and practicing and experimenting. And then once it's really understood and maybe mastered in a certain way, usually that human moves on to doing it a different way and trying on something else. And so to me, the freshness of saying, oh, let's experiment, let's run an experiment it's aligned with how we develop as humans.
Yeah. And the opportunities are endless. Like I think about when I was taking your teenhood program, I remember that one of the things that I was experimenting with and I'm still experimenting with is the car ride. Like I'm still in that phase where I'm taking the kids back to school and it's rich and I dread the day that they'll be on buses because it is this moment in time every day where I, in some ways, get their undivided attention. But in your program, we were experimenting with me alongside other people in that teenhood community with showing up differently, trying out different ways to show up in those moments of connection. And so I was trying, okay, what if as we drive to school, I say nothing? Let's see what happens. What if when I pick them up, I'm just sort of like calm and chill? What if I'm like, hey guys, how's your day been? Like, what if I have a question ready? Not like an interrogation, but like, what if I'm like, hey, I was wondering, like, if you were to go to the airport right now and hop on a plane to anywhere, like, where would you pick kind of thing? But I really want to like underscore that the programs that you run are really just this opportunity to be kind of deliberate about experimenting alongside other people in this community and hearing like, what happened when you ran your like pack a snack experiment? What happened when you changed up your nighttime routine? It's such a delicious place to be very intentional about experimenting. I wonder if you would just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I laugh a little bit because I often say to people, I have a well-rested parenting brain, that I'm passionate about helping people see things a little differently. And I have enough space from it because I'm not in it to see all the different possibilities. And so when people are in a collective or a group or a course with me, I'm offering suggestions very lightly and with a lot of joy, because I recognize that a lot of times you're in the day to day so deeply that having somebody on the outside tell you to try something different or run a different play or practice this skill a little differently, just like a coach on a field would be doing, it can change how you play the game, right? There you go. Let's beat the metaphor. It's like there's a freedom when I don't have to hold all of it. Carrie's going to give me some ideas, or, when she answered that question for that other person, that wasn't my specific scenario, but it sparked this other thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if I could ever convey the depth of joy that brings me, because the idea that people are playing with their relationships and seeing a little differently and trying new things, that's all I want for anybody in life, because to me, that's where new ideas and possibilities and evolution really comes from. That really maybe the way we evolve most efficiently, and we're always evolving, but when we hold it all as this sense of like adventure and exploration, and here we have this guide that's going to point things out, and I'm only one brain, so it's not going to be everything, but it might spark things in you that are harder to access when all you're hearing from are friends who are exhausted, or family members who operate from a very different paradigm, or, media, or even experts out there who are saying, well, what about this? And you're not really slowing it down and getting more pointed inward. And that's what I love about especially inviting people to experiment, because it comes from within. Yes, you gather information from without there, but then the actual experiment that you're running is really coming from the inside out. And that just has a lot of yummy, juicy sort of richness to it, in my opinion.
Well, you said a word there that I really want to kind of pull out, and that is play. But before we do that, I really wanted to have a conversation about non-attachment, because there's a spirit to doing this experimenting that it isn't served by white knuckling and we're going to try it once and we better get the result that we want. That it has to have this layer of non-attachment kind of sprinkled on top. I wonder if you would share a little bit about the importance of letting it all go, like surrendering to the process, just letting it be what is, and then trying something again.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because that really is the spirit that I invite with all of this, and not getting hooked to, oh, I better do it this way because this is the thing I think is going to be the better way to do it. Like, you don't know where this is all going and who these people are unfolding into, and things that you think might not be ideal might be exactly what they need. I mean, that's the crazy part, is you do have to, and that's one of the reasons I love this metaphor of knots, that, it's like when you're just seeing the knot and you're seeing how tight it is, you might think, oh, well, that's just the way it is. But when you start pulling and loosening, and maybe that's the biggest awareness that I know of when you're untangling, is that it has way more to do with the loosening up. That maybe it's, when you have a big jumble, when it's all tight in there, it can feel almost impossible to affect. It's hard to even conceive that it could be different. But as you start to loosen and you start to pull it all out and see the bigger possibilities in it, it sometimes the space actually invites a different possibility. So the experimenting isn't to find the right way. That might be something that emerges, but it's really more to sprinkle, as you say, a different quality of attention and intention to it all. And I just, now that we're talking about it, it's like, it feels youthful and it feels lighter and it feels like there's this opening in it.
Well, and I think too, there's like in the moment non-attachment. There's that, just like you talked about, like just having a looser, like holding it loosely. Yeah. But I think too, we have to recognize that we might be like, yes, I nailed it. This is our perfect way to do the nighttime routine now. And then, as I alluded to in other episodes, like then it's daylight savings time, or then you change time zones, you travel, or then someone comes and visits, or someone goes through a growth spurt, or whatever it is. So I think there's like this micro, and then there's this macro non-attachment that is, we're really served when we kind of like apply it to most days. Like, yeah. But play helps too. And I really love your approach to just family living in general, but I think specifically into trying to just sort of make everything work better with this sort of essence of play involved in it. Why do you think play matters so much, in family life, in making things work better with couples? Would you share a little bit about that?
I think it goes back to something I've been saying for years, which is play is our native tongue, that we all arrive, no matter what country you're living in and what languages, what verbal languages anybody around you is speaking. people arrive playing, that a little tiny human, a days old out of the chute, even in the womb, you could, I've seen moms where they pat one side of their belly and they get a little kick. And then maybe partner comes over and taps and there's no response. Like, that's playful to me. Like, who knows? But that to me is play. And then that newborn arrives and they're so aware, and the interaction of, within weeks, there's that place that really happens at 6 weeks where the little one finally starts to make eye contact, simply because they're finally starting to land and get used to this environment, which is so wild and overwhelming. So all of a sudden they're looking you in the eye and you smile, which is playful because you're delighted by this little one. And then maybe they eke out a little smile, or they woo, and you go woo, and they go woo, and you go wow, and they look oh, and then they look away. Right in that little exchange with both the interaction and the pause, there's all this wiring and firing going on, and no words were even said. And so to me, we can all not just remember to speak the language, we arrive speaking the language of play, which is simply just feeling like you're being met, that you're interacting differently. So there you go. That's experimenting. And in the in the play of it, there's just this richness of experience and, ooh, I like this basically it's a simple like, wow, I want to be near this person. So certainly in the early days and weeks and months, that's the only language other than care and connection that they're speaking. But then as they develop actual language, anything, whether you're trying to teach them how to sit at a table and eat with utensils, or you're trying to do math, or you're trying to cultivate an artistic skill, anytime you bring in that sense of play and experimenting, and you don't hold it like it matters that much, it's light and it's got this sense of like, ooh, let's have some fun here, it usually can go better. I remember years ago, you or Mark once said, like, this works, I just don't always have access to it because I'm tired. Like, I know the play works. And so one of the things that I like to remind people is to save the play energy. You don't need to be your child's playmate. Wonderful to do it, but you don't have unlimited energy, as we've talked about. So you need to be aware of, what are my adult ways of playing, because they're not the same as the child way all the time. Some are just playful humans and they love the games and the make-believe and all of it. But I would say most adults don't love that the way they love other developmentally appropriate for their age things that they do. So I say, use your play energy when you need to change the environment or move through a transition or communicate a lesson or try to get them to hear you differently because you need their cooperation, instead of using that sort of like, hey, now we're serious and now we have to get things done. That's instantly when a young one might go, woo, well, this is really exciting because now you're in a different state. I'm still playing. So let's see where this goes. Because even when you're having a little bit of a hard time with them, that's kind of playful for them. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I think what you're pointing to is this paradox of parenting. And that is that on one hand, a lot of our days and minutes and hours are we're trying to get to something. We're trying to get through something. Like, we've made dinner. Now we all need to get through dinner. We've got to get somewhere. We're all getting in the car. And then there's very little, like, innately, I think, if we're not paying attention, not a lot of play in that. It's very purposeful and directive, right?
Yeah.
And then when you look at the flip side of that, all of these moments that can be play kind of at its essence, which is not meant to be purposeful or directive. It's meant to be we're not supposed to have a purpose to our play. In fact, I think in Stuart Brown's book, Play, he says, if it does, it's no longer play. Now it's work.
Yeah.
But these being able to kind of inject, okay, yes, it's dinner. And I do have a goal here. I want all of that on that plate to end up in everybody's stomachs. But how can I let go of that direction long enough to just say, we used to play this game with the kids. Oh my gosh, don't you eat that. Don't you put a piece of food and then you turn away. Don't you eat it. And then of course they would eat it. And you turn around and go, oh, you ate it. Or, and like, oh my God, we played that for hours and all the food would get eaten. I mean, it would take, if dinner had stalled out, that always kicked it back into gear. But the point I'm trying to make is like, yes, we can't be like always in play mode, but there's so many more opportunities to put it in than I think we give ourselves credit for.
1,000%. And that's what I mean by be thoughtful about how you spend that currency, because it's precious and it works. And it doesn't mean you're being permissive or you're not teaching them good values or you're not, teaching them to respect their elders. What you're doing is keeping life moving here and now in a season of life where maybe it's just a lot of like heels in the, there are times in their development where they're just not going to want to do the things that you want them to do. And you could be very top down and literal and say why they should listen and blah, blah, blah. But you could also remove that adult brain and meet their child brain in a way that brings a feeling of connection and actually does keep things moving differently. And I will promise you, like I said, that requires you to be a certain level of aware of how you're running your own system. And if you're not getting any of your own kind of play, which might be quietly reading books or being out with friends or doing your own work, like your own creative work, if that's not a piece of the puzzle, unless you're really just somebody who loves being in that kid energy, which there are people like that, but most adults aren't, it's going to make things a lot easier if you have this kind of toolkit of, all right, how can I pause, notice that I'm getting a little revved, and maybe even play. Like I've had lots of people in my world say, oh, wow, when I heard you give me permission to have the funny freak out and to say like, crazy parent is heading out right now. And here I come. And the storm is brewing and I'm going to lose it. Mm-hmm. That is fun to a kid versus the letting it go, freaking out and doing it unconsciously. And it just feels differently. So I love this statement that I say a lot, which is know your tendency. And this applies to play and experimenting, but it's basically know your tendency. So what's the way you typically do something, and try doing it differently. Just try something you haven't tried. So if, your mornings are hard and you realize, oh, wow, yeah, I'm barking a lot. I'm barking from the other room, telling people what to do so we can get out of the house. And it's become this sort of nobody moves until mom or dad is freaking out. Try it differently. So if that's your tendency and it's not exactly getting you the outcome you want, run an experiment. Go up to them and look them in the eye. And before you say anything, just say, wow, I really like you. You're really cute. And then say, maybe in a whisper, because the other way was barking, maybe you say, hey, we got to get out of the house in a couple. So let's hop out like bunnies, okay? And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, but why wouldn't you lighten it up and give it an opportunity to potentially go differently and surprise all of you?
I love it. All right. This is great. So we've got experimenting, we've got non-attachment, we've got play. You've just given everybody an activity, which is find something that you always do a certain way and just do it differently. Just try that out. You also have a great tool or a great resource on your website. It's the Essentials of Familyhood. I know people can go to carrieconti.com. If you go click on resources, they can download that. I love it. It's a wonderful thing to just put on your fridge and view every single day. What is it? And why did you create that?
So it's the essentials of familyhood, and it basically takes the 4 pillars of what I see, the 4 pillars of family life, which is personhood. So you and you, the relationship you have with yourself, parenting, the relationship you have with your growing humans, partnership, whoever the adults in your life are that you're living and loving or just growing with, the people that are in your inner world, and then the family as a unit, and really recognizing that, these are relationships and there's tools and reminders and questions that you can just stay aware of. That's what that's, I think, what you and I know about the work I do and what I know about my work because I've been doing it so long and why I create programs. It's one thing to share all of this and I could do this endlessly, but there's something about really making the investment and the time and the commitment of saying, like, I want to learn this. Like, I want to cultivate, I want to experiment. I want to have a coach and a team of humans that I am embarking on this way of operating. And, why? Because there's things to be learned and there's ways to play and there's questions that you want to ask. And so that's what I do because I really see that modern parents are both learning new ideas of how to be with their people, but they're also having to unlearn and untie and unknot and unravel some of what they got. And to me, that takes energy, it takes effort. And why not do it with someone like me that really loves helping people do that? That's what I do. And the idea that I get to do that however long with however many people is just never ending joy. I feel like I win the lottery every day because I get to share ideas and give people inspiration to try making life their very own, especially family life.
So our next episode, we're going to be moving into another of my favorite topics that you speak on, and that is appreciation, love, and savoring. So I can't wait to get into that one. But this was awesome. I love this conversation today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Not Parenting. For any resources or offerings we spoke about in the episode, remember you can head to carrieconti.com or you can click on the links in the episode show notes. Thanks for being here.